Welcome to the Online Entrepreneur Experience podcast that details the ins and outs, the how-tos, and the ups and downs of living a life of an online business owner.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Online Entrepreneur Experience. I am the Viking marketer, obviously, and then there's SWR over here, the man, the myth, the legend, Jared Jenny. We're going to be popping on another topic today. You guys, last week was amazing. If you guys didn't go see that, go back and watch it. But we got another explosive topic for you guys today. Like, Jared's going to be dropping some bombs. So what are we talking about today, bro?
You know, I think we have three aspects of our life. Every single person has them. It's going to be your past, your present, and your future. And I think a lot of the reason that people get, problems with anxiety or, feelings of failure is because they live with one foot in the past and one foot in the future. They completely forget to live in the present moment. And while it can be hard to do, you have to, I'm not saying you can't learn from your past experiences and you can't be considerate of your future and mindful and plan for that. But if you live with one foot here and one here, of course you're going to be anxious because this is something that you can never change. And this is something that is uncertain. So if you forget to live right here, I wanted to discuss how important the present moment is.
I love that, bro. Like, I think even like just the way that you started that off is like so like huge, and it is. And I don't think most people are really aware that they're doing these things. It's just the way that they've just become accustomed to living life. And I think this is the reason why like there's so much anxiety in life now, because there's never been more anxiety ever in the world. And I think it's almost like information overload. So you have all this information about your past, it's so easy to access it, and then you have all this information about the future and like what you could achieve, and it's just like so like what would you say like those people that are living in mainly those two areas, but still obviously they have to be living in present, like what would you say like the state of mind those people are in? Are you saying they're anxious, or do you feel like they don't have direction, or they're indecisive, or what do you think their kind of state is?
All of the above. I think, a lot of people have things in their life that in the past, it's kind of a double-edged sword because there's either things that you regret, and everyone has them. We're human. We've all done stupid things. We've all made mistakes. And there's things that were really, really good that are in the past. We don't have them anymore. So, either way you look at the past, whether it was a good memory or a bad memory, it can affect you negatively because either you want that to happen again or you wish you could go back and change it. And you can't, right? You absolutely cannot do that. And then you think about your future and it's like, okay, this is something I want to do. I'm not there right now, or this is something that's coming up. I really am not looking forward to that. And it puts you in this state of being where you're just going through the motions in your everyday life because your brain can only occupy so much at one time. We've all been there where you feel like you have brain fog or you're being pulled in too many directions. You can't focus. And if you're focused on those two things, this part, which is the part that matters for that part, the future, you become like you're just going through the motions because you're at your job or you're doing things around the house, but your focus isn't there. It's like when you're in school, right? How many of you liked reading your textbooks? I hated it, like some of the information was interesting, some of the teachers were really cool, but like if they said, okay, here's your history book, go home and read 75 pages, you can read it and not know a damn thing about what you read because you're just scanning over, going through the motions. Well, if you're doing that in your everyday present life because your brain is so occupied with these other two things, how are you supposed to get to this future that you actually want?
Oh man, that's huge. That is simply huge, bro. Like mind blowing. Like once again, I wish I had some bombs. But I think that it's just crazy because that is how we live life, and I think the way that you portrayed that, we all were in like school at one point in time, and there's so much information that we put in ourselves that we just never retained or anything like that. And it's just because you're not present in the moment. And when you're not present in the moment, it doesn't matter. And I'm sure you've been in those conversations where you're having an active conversation with somebody and they're not listening to you at all because they're thinking about something from the past or something that they have to do. And they're just like not there. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. And I'll go back to school again because it's something that everyone can relate to. But I was big into cross country and track when I was in high school. And I loved it. Some of my best friends that, 10, 12 years later, I still talk to, like we all got to spend time together, and it was a good time in my life. But I also was the person that before a race, I would get so nervous that I would like physically throw up. Like as soon as the gun went off and we could start, I was okay. But like beforehand, it ruined like 3 or 4 days for me, before it got to the point where I almost quit. And I was the captain of the team, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't sleep. I can't. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what? No matter how nervous I get, at the end of the day, I get to go home and crawl in the same bed that I always, I'm gonna. It's not like I'm gonna die. And by my senior year, I was finally like, okay, like I'm good. Like I can do this. But I look back on that now, and like it was, like we like watching UFC, you and I do, and I love the competitive nature of it, But that era for me is gone, like as an athlete, and so I don't get to compete anymore. I just get to look back at those memories, and I'm like, I wasted so much time being nervous and not enjoying it. And now I wish I could go back and know what I knew now and just be present in that moment. Be like, this isn't going to last forever. You're not going to die. Nothing's going to kill you. Like, just enjoy where you're at.
And I think that's huge. And like I did that in so many different other capacities and everything. And there's so many times that I wanted to quit when I was playing sports. And now you get to watch, like, I mean, this weekend is going to be like a crazy.
Oh man,
I can't wait. But but there's so many of those kind of things, right? And then instead of just enjoying the moments that you're in and actually like savoring it, you're pushing it off. And then once again, you're just creating more of that regret for the future to hold on to. And then you have this backpack full of baggage that you're just carrying around with you, right? And I think a lot of the time, you really have to like forgive yourself for doing those things so you can start creating those new habits and everything like that, because there's just no way of being happy long term other than these short bursts when you're in those kind of two components at the exact same time, right? Like you have to enjoy it. And I think those are those lessons. As long as you can learn from those things, like you can pull out a much better future for yourself and present. And so like there's goods and bad to like focusing on the past, right? Like it's not all bad. Like I was just talking about a little bit of that stuff. So there's the good, there's the bad, there's the ugly of the past. So like what are those good and bad, and why is it often called like being regretful if you are thinking about the past too much? And is there something that they can pull out of the past that they can really serve their present and future with?
Oh yeah, the past can be very valuable, but you got two options, If we're talking specifically about negative things that have happened in your past, which is where most of us are going to go, that's what's going to occupy more time. Like you might think about a good time, but then again, ultimately it's still negative, because if you're thinking about this great time, even subconsciously, you're like, okay, I wish I could do that again, or I wish I could relive that moment, and you can't. But if your focus is on the things that you wish you could change, instead of being like, I was that asshole or I was so stupid, you should be like, okay, but I remember how that made me feel, or how that makes me feel now. And I know, and I learned that I don't want to go to that place again. I don't want to be that person again, and you're not defined by what mistakes you made in the past. You're defined by how you decide to use that to better yourself in the future. It's like anything, if you're in sports, let's say that again, because a lot of people can relate to sports, and you learn a new technique or new footwork or, all this kind of stuff, and then you never implement it, you're not going to improve. Same with your life and your values and your morals. Like if something didn't sit well with you that's in your past, use that as a tool to know, like, okay, this is where I stand with that. I know myself better, and I'm going to use that to step above that and become a better person, not, oh, I was such a piece of shit, and then just dwell on it. It's the past. It is what it is. You can't change it. It happened and it's stamped there.
100%. I think so many people put so much energy into wanting to affect the past. And it's just like, that is legitimately not able to happen. And it's crazy to put that like thoughts there, like, oh, I just wish I could do that. I just wish I could do this. I just wish I could do that. And it's just like, that's great that you wish you could do that, but how is that going to serve you going forward? If you continue to stop the pattern there, I just wish I could have done that there. Not like, I wish I could have done that now, now, because of that, I'm going to change, because then history will just keep repeating itself, right? So using like MMA for an example, you go in there and you're like, okay, every time I step forward, the guy clocks me in the face. It's like, okay, cool. If I keep stepping forward and this guy's going to keep clocking me in the face with his very fast jab, Okay, cool. So if I step forward, step to the right, so he can't clock me with the jab, then you're learning from it. You can't like end the round being like, oh, it's crazy. I can't even fight this guy because every time I step forward, he clocks me in with a jab right into the nose. It's like, no, like just learn from that. Stop stepping
Yeah.
forward, step to the right. And then he can't do that. But that's what so many people do is they have these patterns that they've done their whole lives, right? So they just keep repeating it instead of like taking it and appreciating it for what it was, like the failure that what it was, so you can actually improve yourself in the future, right?
It's all about, making those adjustments. I mean, it's like when you go to college, right? It's like when you go to college and everyone's partying, it's the first time you're on your own and you don't have any rules and you drink too much and then you do it again and you drink too much and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I feel like ass when I do this. Like I know not to do that again. You learn your tolerance and you got to do that with life too, like everything is a balance. And if you don't find your tolerances and make the changes you need to be productive, like nothing's going to change for you.
I love that, man. And I think that's such a great example because, like you go to college, you go party and you have that one experience where you get too drunk and everyone's like, oh, no problem, Jared. Like you did that once. But if you do that 5 times, you're like, oh, Jared can't handle his alcohol. Jared like is an alcoholic. Jared's like, like all these negative things with it because you're not learning from your mistakes. So now you get labeled as that because you have now become that because you haven't learned from it and you just started embodying it, right? And instead of embodying those things, like just do it, right? But at the exact same time that when you do that, you have to also let it go, right? Like if you've made that adequate change, you have to let it go. Like my mom, and this is a crazy story. Like we're at one of my cousin's weddings, and she said something to my cousin about like she got a boob implants, and so she said something to some people about it, and she didn't know that she wasn't being open about like the implants that she got, and this was 2 decades ago too. She still talks about how she wronged my cousin, even though she's not that person. That's not how she's labeled. Nobody thinks about her, but she hasn't forgiven herself for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you got to let those things go. You can choose to sit and stew on it or decide like, hey, maybe I made a mistake. And it's like when people are in relationships and they tell you that, oh, me and my significant other, my wife, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, we never fight ever. It's like, I know you're lying. Like maybe you're adults about it and you don't scream in each other's face and you show each other respect, but everybody fights. I mean, it's you're lying if you tell me that you never bicker and argue with the person that you love. Like that's not realistic.
No, it's not, man, because then there's no relationship there. That means you don't care about each other. So you shouldn't be telling everybody about it. Like you either don't talk to each other and associate each other, or you just really have no emotional attachment to what the other person's doing. Because if you care about them at all, you're gonna bicker with them in some type of way, like arguing and debating and stuff. Like there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing. It's just doing it in a productive kind of way, right? Not like breaking things and yelling and calling names. That's not a productive kind of way. But it's okay to do that. So with all of this being said about the past, let's leave that in the past. Let's move over to the future. Like we just talked about like how like leaving that stuff in the past and learning from it will serve you in the future. So how can be living in the future state then? How can that also be the good, the bad, the ugly? What are those on that one? Like what is it only bad for just living in the future? Or is there good? And like what can you take about that for having that kind of mindset?
The future, again, it's dangerous. You don't want to live there. You want to live in the present because that's where you're taking tools from the past, bringing them in and getting them to the future that you want. So it all works in line with, they're all equally important, but you got to live in that present moment. And, when we decided a few days ago that we were going to do this topic, I was like, you know what, I'm going to bring this into my automotive video this week. So I went through and I spent like 4 hours just going through my hard drives and finding old videos. And I'm like, I'm just going to make like a progressive blooper video of like, okay, here's from 2015 to now, and just look at, where I was back then and where it is now and be like, and there's a reason I keep those videos around. Some of them are so cringeworthy. Like they look like they were filmed with a potato, it's just, but you have to you sometimes have to go and reflect on the past to make sure that you're not discouraged about your future. Like if you're a driven person, you should be maybe satisfied with your progress, but you never want to get to a spot where you're like so satisfied that you're like, okay, you know what's next? I'm done. Like I did everything I want to do. You should always be hungry for more. But if I sat down in front of you right now and I was like, Mark, I'm so freaking pissed. Like my YouTube channel doesn't have 1 million subscribers, you know? And if that was my next goal, that's great to think about that in the back of your mind. But I'm at 2,500 subscribers. So I need to be more like, okay, 10K would be a good next goal because that's feasible. It's reachable. If you set the bar so high that, there's no possible way that in the foreseeable future, you're going to have attained that, that's detrimental as well. And I think social media does a really good job. And we talked about this last week a little bit, being flashy and people faking it till they make it. But when you see like even genuine people, when you see something they've accomplished that's like super awesome, whatever your interests are, you don't see the behind the scenes. Like people put the stuff on social media because they're proud of it, right? You're not going to put a mistake that you made, like, hey, I feel ashamed of this. You're not going to put this on there. So if you see like, oh, here's the prize, you don't see all the steps it took to get there. So that's detrimental as well, because people, look at it. If these are people and goals and things that you look up to or things you want to replicate, it's like, oh man, must be nice. They got that. But you don't get to see any of the process.
100%. Everyone's an overnight success, but no one's an overnight success. And I think
Right.
that is the thing, right? Like social media is your highlight reel, but it's funny that you said like no one puts their failures on online. I made a post like 2 days ago, and it was just like I overindulged on Sunday, and I gained 6 pounds in one day. And I just got one of those fit tracker scales, and I was just playing around with it. I saw this. I'm like, well, I have to be able to use this as something, right? And it was only such that same topic. It's like, you know what, like you're gonna have those kind of failures and all that type of stuff along your road, but it's just about like understanding the failures that you had, so you don't beat yourself up. Yeah, of course, eating a pizza and a half, pie and a half, candy, chips, dip, all that kind of stuff, all in 24 hours probably isn't conducive for you to be in your most fit, pristine state. So it's just those things. So a lot of people won't. And oftentimes for me, like if I'm trying to mimic other people, I want the people that are authentic. But that's last week's topic. So, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, though, is everyone wants this instant gratification. They see these hikes that they want. So instead of like putting like, hey, I should make $1,000 online because I've never made any money, I want to make $50,000 online.
Yeah.
And then they're in such like a crazy dream state that the future is going to be this, and they don't actually put like a realistic timeline on it. So then they end up like failing because they're so in the future instead of just focusing on the steps that it will take them to get there, right? And I think that is the biggest issue. And often, like we see that so often, like the online space, is people are like, I want all this stuff, and then they don't even open up a training module for it, right? Like right. I think that is one of the biggest detriments about people living in that future state. You know what I mean?
It's the ladder has small achievable steps for a reason. You want to climb up on your roof, you got to take 12, 15 steps. There's not a step here and a step at the top. Like you have to make that slow and steady progress. So that's what being present is.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you. Like with that, it's so funny. So like, what is something that can get you into the present state? Like if you're so often being in that regretful and that dreaming state, every day you wake up, you're like, oh, yesterday sucked. The future is going to be so bright. And then today you don't do anything different. Like, how do you get yourself out of those two ways and into be like more present in the moment where you can actually take action and be in control of not being in that monotonous state, so you can actually take sizable action to get yourself into that future goal that you have?
I think you have to realize that things, those goals and those accomplishments that you want up here, you're not going to see instantly. And a lot of us, like I'm self-employed, you're self-employed, and a lot of times you get in this state where you're like, I should be making money every single day. And I was just talking to one of my buddies about this. He owns a small business as well. And he's like, God, today sucked. I didn't make any money today. And I'm like, dude, you worked on X, Y, Z in a week. Those things, you're going to get paid for those. And he's like, oh, yeah. And I said, okay, riddle me this. And you worked in a shop setting. I worked in a shop setting. He worked in a shop setting. I said, how often when we were at the dealerships or the shops did we get paid every day? And he's like, huh. And I'm like, no, you got paid every 2 weeks. Like that's how it works, So, but we knew that, and we knew the work we were doing, we were going to get paid for eventually. So just because you work for yourself doesn't mean that every single day you're going to see, the fruits of your labor. And I think if you wake up, every day you have a choice. You can either continue to dwell on those mistakes and those failures, things like that. But also, like you said, if your head's up in the clouds and you're like, okay, you're going to spend your whole day thinking and dreaming about having this, and anything you're doing is going to be monotonous and repetitive. You have to be like, okay, I want this goal right here. This is what I want to accomplish. What are little steps today that are going to get me a little bit closer to this goal? And it could be physically grounding yourself too. If you're way up here and your head's in the clouds and you're feeling unmotivated, you're not getting anything done, pet your damn dog, feel your shoes, feel the ground that's under your feet, go drink a cup of coffee and focus on how it tastes. You got to bring yourself back to reality. Reality, physical reality, and what's in our brain is oftentimes two different things, because your brain is that switching station that's perceiving and receiving all this information, but your mind is different. Your mind can go in a million different directions. And if you focus on that and you're not present at all, nothing's going to get accomplished. So even if it sounds stupid, right? But even if you're physically grounding yourself, by petting your dog or whatever that thing is, you're going to bring yourself back to right now. And then you can refocus and be like, okay, what can I do right now? Like I'm out of La La Land. What can I do?
No, I love that, man. Like bringing yourself back in is so huge. And I think so many people don't do that. They just they sit in these other states instead of being like, I'm going to take an action to get myself back where I need to be. And I think that is one thing that really, really is that negative that happens with people. Well, like I'm really unhappy about the past, so I'm just going to think about all the things I can do in the future and everything like that. And then it doesn't do anything because you can't actually move to that state. Like that isn't like anything that you can do now, and the past you can't do anything about. So you end up staying in this state where you can't actually do anything about those things. So like taking yourself into a place where you can actually take an action or a step towards the things. Yeah, I think that's a massive game changer right there. And it's so funny that you put that thing about getting paid every 2 weeks, because it's just like this is customizable in my brain. I get paid every 2 weeks. But like as like this business owner, you're just like, oh, I'm dying if I'm not getting paid today. And it's just like,
yeah,
well, yesterday you made $5,000. That was more than you made in a whole month before. But for some reason, you're dying today. Like, maybe it'd be a little bit more realistic about what's going on. It's just crazy. And I see this time after time after time with people. It's just like, okay, you made this plan to get to this destination, and instead of continuing to put in the work to get to the destination, and you said like, today I'm going to do A, tomorrow's B, the next day C, tomorrow's D, E, F, G. They get to like D and they're just like, oh, this isn't working. And it's just like, well, did you look that A, B, D? You're actually ahead of plan, but you just haven't got to Z yet, which was the end result. And it's just like, yeah, but it just can't be working. And then they throw it all out the window, and then they restart this cycle. And they're like, why is nothing ever working for me, right?
Right. And you're going to have to, everybody, one of the most important things in life, I truly believe this, is that you need to have a sense of purpose. Like I think that's why so many people that inherit money and maybe they have no skills or no, direction, and they're miserable. And it's like they have all the money in the world, but they're miserable, right? Because they don't feel like they have a purpose. And being present, you're working on chipping away at that goal that you have, but you're not there yet, and you might not see the progress right away. And maybe you wake up in the morning and you have to do this thing presently to help you get here, and you're just dreading it. You're like, I don't want to do this. So you fart around all day and you kind of put it off, and then you sit down on the couch. Well, subconsciously, you had no purpose that day. You didn't get anything done. So you're sitting there and you just feel miserable versus, maybe I'll put cleaning the shop as an example. Like once in a while, if I'm super busy, like I'll go in and it's like a bomb went off in there, and it's like, God, I don't want to do this. And all day I'm cleaning and I'm like, I really don't want to be doing this. This sucks. But at the end of the day, when I'm done and it's like presentable and looks nice and everything has a spot, I go home and sit down. I'm like, I feel really good about today. And it could even be like subconsciously, like, I don't know why I'm in a good mood, but I'm in a good mood. It's because you were productive. You had a purpose that day.
It's a visual purpose, right? Like you're like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And you did it. And then it's complete and it looks amazing. You got the result that you desired and everything, right? And that is the biggest thing that I think people lack so much. And why, when you see people writing to-do lists and they check off different things, they're so much more motivated to get to the end of the list, is because they actually have a visual that they're like, oh, I accomplished and I accomplished and I accomplished. But most people don't make these lists, even though they have these lists in their head. And we're thinking about a billion different things, but we're relying only on our brains to like keep us motivated in all these different things. And if you don't actually have the checklist of what you're doing every single day, you're not going to go home and be like, hey, I had that really purposeful day.
When I first became self-employed, before online, before any of that stuff, it was, you start from zero. So I had no customers, I had nothing. And the first thing I went out and did was spend $400 getting shop shirts made. And everyone's like, why would you, like, you don't have any customers, you barely have a shop, like, why would you? And I'm like, because I need to get up in the morning and feel like I'm going to work, so even like those first couple weeks when I didn't have any customers, I'd set my alarm for 6:30 in the morning, get up, put on my work shirt and get there and be like, okay, what, I got to find something to do. But it's building that pattern. If I would have quit my job and shown up in my grubby, just grubby random street clothes and feel like I have no direction and sleep in till 10 o'clock and then show up at the shop, and it would have failed. It's just like you said last week on our podcast, that once a week you dress up because it makes you feel good. It all adds to that purpose. And if I wouldn't have felt like I had that structure getting going, I wouldn't be where I am now. Like, it just would not have worked. And it's a mind game, because just making those shop shirts, which sounds stupid when you don't have any customers, but it made me feel like it was organized and in order.
And you feel like you represent something all at the same time, like you're representing your purpose.
Yeah.
It's like you're putting on your tracksuit to go to the track and hit your relay up, right? Like you're getting in the zone. It almost helps you get into that like state as well, right? Like, this is work time, you take off the shirt, it's no longer work time. Like that compartmentalization. But if everything's always the same, I think that it's really hard to rise up in any kind of way, right? Like, if your gym's at home, your work's at home, your food's at home, all those things are at home, everything's at home. When you like relax with your kids are at home, all those kind of things. If there's no actual zoning in your brain, you're just going to stay in this one state, whatever state you decide at the beginning of the day that you're in, and you're just going to stay in that kind of state. It's funny because I was just talking to one of the salespeople I just recently hired within the company, and I told him earlier this week, I was like, bro, I'm going to swag you out, man. Pick something from my store. I'm sending it to you. Let's get this. And so I followed up with him because it's been like 2 days. I was like, bro, I want to swag you out. Like, let me swag you out. Like, tell me what you want. He's like, this is what I want. Like, does this mean like it's I forget what exactly he said. Like, is this like the start of the process? Like, is this mean it's all real now? And I was like, you fucking bet it does. But it goes to the exact same thing as what you were just saying with that, right?
And that can be very detrimental. And I'll leave that on this little end of this topic, is that when I first started, I didn't have money for a shop or anything. So I set up my home garage, which is an oversized garage, but I set that up and I was working out of there. And without realizing it, that was like one of the worst things I could have done, because I was literally like, my relaxation time and my living, everything was in the exact same space. And if I had a big project to do, I felt like even when I went inside, like at the end of the day, it was like, I should really be out there. Like, it's right there. I should be out there doing this. And it got to the point where I was working such weird hours. And like, even when I went to bed, I was like, it was hanging over my head because I was working in the same place that I was living. And once I got my shop, and at first I was kind of like, okay, this is inconvenient because now I have to physically drive there. But I was like, you know how nice this is? Like, you know how it is as a business owner, you're never really done. Like, even when you go home, you're thinking about something, you're doing paper, back end work, whatever. But at least I had kind of that feeling like I can close the door and go home and tomorrow's a new day. I didn't have that because you can't shit where you sleep, like you have to have separation.
100%, bro. Like, I agree so much with that, because when I first started, I just had a laptop that I was working off of. I would work off of it in my like living room in front of the TV. My wife would be watching TV. I'd be distracted. I'd never be like I was productive, and I'd never feel like I was ever turning off. But like, I had to make the shift to like moving my office to our old den in our old house. and being able to be like, when I go downstairs, it's work time. When I'm upstairs, it's no longer work time. I get to break and I get to shut off. But like, if you don't ever shut off, like you're going to burn yourself out and just end up essentially dying, right? Like, and your business will go there with you. So you have to have that kind of compartmentalization. I think that's an awesome way. But was there any, like to end up, but was there anything last that you want to say other than that before we tune off for the day?
I think, just be mindful of where your brain's at. Cause and that this, without diving too deep into it, maybe in the future, but your subconscious and your conscious mind work together, and there can be things affecting you that you don't even realize are affecting you. So the more you can stay in this present state and be physically and mentally grounded, you're going to have much more clarity towards your goals. So if we can just be mindful every day, give yourself a little bit of worry time. That sounds silly. That's something that I do though. I will give myself like 15 minutes a day where I just sit down and I'm like, okay, what if this, what if that, what if this? And you'll notice that the what ifs are, and you're like, okay, well that means that it's not real, and I give myself that time to do that anxious worrying. And then afterwards I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. That was worry time. Now I'm back to being present.
Ah, man, what a way to end. But like, you put that end time on it. Like you have this, there's an end date or end time on this amount and it's over. And I think so many people, like my dad still talks about things from his childhood. It's like, when is the end date on this, right? Like, when is the end part of this? And so many people don't have an end part. They don't have an end date. They don't ever work through it, and then they just carry it with them. So man, that's huge.
Yeah.
Guys, put end dates on things. Just like the end of this episode, we're putting an end time on it right now. I know that you guys got a great value. Let us know if you have any questions about this type of stuff. We talked about some really deep stuff. Let us know in a comment section if you guys have any questions. We'll answer them personally. Or maybe we'll do even an episode on it. So you never know. Maybe you never know, or you can win some money. So we like to do giveaways too. So make sure that you're filling up our comment section, ask us those questions. We will get back to you. But anyways, this is another episode of the Online Entrepreneur Experience. Thanks for tuning in with us. We will see you next week.
Always a pleasure. Talk soon, man.
Thanks for tuning into the Online Entrepreneur Experience. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes that we're releasing and any of these amazing pieces of value that we're giving out. And if you could take the time out of your day and leave us a review, we would be so grateful. We look forward to seeing you on that next episode.